Dr. Ed Zimmerman, Aesthetic Revolution, Las Vegas. I am blessed to be here today with Dr. Charles Meeker, both a PhD and JD, so Doctor, and we're going to be talking about stem cells, exosomes, and all things regenerative. And I'm thrilled to have you here. Would you tell us a little bit about you and how you
Sure.
got into this? Because you have a fascinating journey.
Happy to. I would say no one is more thrilled to be here than me. Thank you for having me, for the invitation. This is a great clinic to be at, and a great person to be on camera with. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
So my background started in the life sciences. My undergraduate degree was in general biology, but my doctoral studies were in molecular biology and biochemistry. So my PhD is in a field called oncological sciences, or cancer biology, which I received from the University of Utah School of Medicine, where I studied at the Huntsman Cancer Institute.
Not too shabby.
Well, it was 3 days after defending my dissertation that I packed up the family and moved out to law school. And that's the direction that I took in my career afterwards. I combined my scientific degrees with my law degree, and I work in the field of medical and biotech law, healthcare law, patent law, FDA compliance, and other things. So I was studying stem cells way back in graduate school. This was back at a time where there was a lot of ethical concerns over the use of frozen embryos for their embryonic stem cells. Remember this time? And I always was fascinated by it, but there didn't seem to be a pathway for using these therapeutically, and I never thought much of it. So years later, in 2024, the state of Utah passed a law authorizing healthcare providers to perform stem cell therapies that weren't yet approved by the FDA. So this really piqued my interest. It got me super curious, and I dove into it head first. And what I learned was a few fascinating things. Number one, that Utah state law does not supersede federal law. It simply provides a comfort blanket for healthcare providers in Utah to know that the state licensing board and the state enforcement arms won't come after them for violating some kind of state laws against using FDA non-approved products. So still very cool, but what about every other state in the country? And that's where things really got interesting for me, as I learned that there was a federal regulatory path, a federal regulatory authorization for using birth tissue derived stem cells, umbilical cord stem cells, for example, in therapeutic practices, not as FDA approved drugs, but as compliant human cellular and tissue based products. And I got so excited. I was like, there's so much going on here, but I have a thriving legal practice. So I guess I just have to watch this opportunity pass me by. And bless her heart, my wife said, I cannot let this opportunity pass us by. So she said, I'm starting a stem cell compliance and supply and clinical support company, and I would love you to support me in this endeavor. So I'm looking at her and saying, well, of course I'll support you in this, and I'll be whatever you need me to be as you launch this. So here we are, a year down the road, and we're having a grand time teaching and educating and supporting clinics in their implementation and practice of stem cell therapy.
Like you've done with us. You've become part of our Ohana.
Oh, thank you.
And we do these things for our wives, and they certainly do these things for us.
Indeed.
So it's very important. And for me to discover your expertise in your company has been like a breath of fresh air, because I've been struggling for over a decade doing adipose-derived stromal vascular fraction and IV deployments, and trying to do all the things within the legal guidelines and compliance, and it's a headache.
Absolutely.
Even having been a cell biologist out of Hopkins as a kid, because I came up through a similar pathway, so we're sort of brothers by different mothers.
Indeed.
And then did my master's on B and T lymphocyte interactions, and then didn't see a pathway to, research is just not supported. It's a hard way to make a living. So I went into medicine and found my true calling in aesthetic medicine. But this makes aesthetic medicine go the next yard. It raises the bar on healing. It raises the bar on how we can help people function and get back the function they used to have when they were young. So it's been very energizing, and it's like a brand new ball game. And I don't know how we get this out to the rest of the people. It's like dragging the rest of medicine, kicking and screaming, herding cat, to bring them into the current century of what we can really do to help our patients.
Yep. I think we start like this. We start by talking about it.
Yep.
We start by disseminating information that's accurate, that's useful, and that can be implemented at a clinical level. And then we invite others to come be part of what we're doing things the correct way. For so many years, this was a fly under the radar, trade your stem cells in the back alley type of just sketchy industry.
Yeah.
And now we have all of the information we need. We've got federal regulatory guidelines that are possible, easy in some ways to follow if you just know what they are and understand them, and you're willing to put forth the effort and the time and the money to comply with those guidelines. So we love what we're seeing in the industry. We invite more practitioners to come and be a part of regenerative medicines, rather than only limiting yourself to traditional practices of medicine.
Yeah. So let's start to go down the rabbit hole, and talk a little bit about the biology and the therapeutic mechanisms of action and such, and the differences between what's available out there.
Sure.
This is your forte, and this is why I'm so excited to learn from you.
Sure. Well, I guess where you start with this is you have to delineate between two different industries, right? And really it's two different subsets of one industry and then a second industry altogether. So we have within our adult bodies archives, deposits of stem cells. You find them in your adipose fat tissue, you find them in your bone marrow, and in other tissues in the body as well. And so everyone knows that stem cells are a part of human biology. Many people just don't understand what their function is biologically, and therefore what their function is therapeutically. So as the name suggests, a stem cell forms the stem or the source of other tissue types in the body. This is where life began in the womb. When a fertilized egg develops into a blastocyst, it has a mass of embryonic stem cells. And these embryonic stem cells have the capacity to self-renew, right? To proliferate, to divide, and to make new stem cells. And they have the capacity to differentiate into other cell types downstream of where the stems were. This is really exciting. Can you imagine the master file, the source of all cells in the body? So everyone really jumped on board with this narrative and said, we're going to do stem cell therapy because stem cells have the capacity to become other tissue types. So it's great when you talk about this biologically, but it doesn't always translate therapeutically. When you remove stem cells from your tissues and they're no longer in their biological location receiving their biological signals, they don't always function the same way therapeutically that they function biologically. And nowhere is this more clear than when you look at placental-derived stem cells. These are different, right? These are not embryonic stem cells.
That's important.
Right? They're not the growing fetus, the growing baby's own stem cells, and they're not the stem cells taken from an adult patient. These are stem cells that are produced in the placenta, which for all intents and purposes is the filter and the command center for growing a new human being. So these stem cells produced in the placenta are sent into the umbilical cord, where they both accumulate and pass into the baby's circulatory system. Umbilical cord blood stem cells circulate through the baby's body. And what do they do when they arrive in the baby's body? I'll give you a hint. They do not implant themselves into the baby's growing muscle or bone or liver or heart and spawn new cells. They're not stem seeds, they're stem cells, and they do something different. There's something else they don't do. They don't have a little hammer and nails and come in and repair areas of damaged tissues. They're not worker cells in that way. What they are is incredible couriers.
Yes, exactly.
Delivery vehicles.
Yep.
They contain, because they produced, they manufactured a whole portfolio, a plethora of natural, biological, human growth factors and cytokines. That's the power. We'll always come back to this. Whenever you and I talk, we always come back to growth factors and cytokines found in these stem cells.
Yeah.
So in the womb, why does a growing baby need growth factors and cytokines? So embryogenesis, fetal growth and development, actually ends up causing a lot of problems before it gives beautiful life.
Oh yeah.
And there's four main problems that we see as cells are rapidly dividing over and over and over again. Okay?
Yep.
Run through these with me. What are the four main issues that we see? The first one is when cells divide, they form inflammation. There's inflammation caused by the process of rapid cell growth and division, mistakes being made.
Yep.
Number two, we get cellular debris.
Lots of debris.
Lots of debris, right?
Yep.
Number three, there's a problem with a lack of blood flow. When we don't have enough blood vessels to feed this system, then we find that we have a problem on our hands, and the cells end up just turning off. They don't want to continue growing and dividing, and for a fetus, that's a problem.
Yeah.
If the cells no longer want to grow and divide. So these growth factors and cytokines have an amazing function biologically. They bind to cellular receptors in the baby's growing body, and that binding event activates a signal transduction pathway, a molecular mechanism.
Full cascade.
That's right, a full cascade involved in changing the gene expression in the cell and altering cellular behavior. And when you can alter cell behavior is when you can get real world biological responses, the kinds that you need. And the major biological responses that we need are controlling inflammation, clearing away cellular debris, forming new vasculature, and enhancing cellular growth and division. So it's crazy. The four problems that we encounter in fetal growth and development are the same four solutions provided by growth factor signaling in the baby's growing body. It's not that the stem cells controlled inflammation. The stem cells didn't clear out the cellular debris or form into the new blood vessels or grow and divide and create new cells. The stem cells were the delivery vehicle for the growth factors and cytokines, which activated the body's own cellular pathways for accomplishing these outcomes. So wouldn't you know it, when you harness the power of umbilical cord stem cells by purifying them out of the umbilical cord blood and you administer them therapeutically, the same biological mechanism of action that we saw in the womb occurs therapeutically. These stem cells serve as incredible delivery vehicles for the growth factors and cytokines. The same growth factors and cytokines that we have in our body, but we are now supplementing with the original source for growth factors and cytokines that we know will bind cell receptors and turn on molecular pathways associated with controlling inflammation and clearing away cellular debris and helping our body to form new blood vessels and enhance enhancing cellular growth and division, which of course is integral to cell migration and wound healing and proper turnover of cells and growth and repair. It's beautiful. The same way the baby's body was able to grow and regenerate and repair in the womb, our adult bodies can grow and regenerate if we just turn on those pathways.
Which is what's so exciting, is being a surgeon, now having access to helping people heal phenomenally well.
Yeah.
In dramatically reduced amounts of time.
So you tell me, what are some regenerative healing pathways that you as a surgeon really want to turn on for your patients?
So thinking forehead to feet.
Yes.
Because we do that if we do a facelift or we do resurfacing of the skin. And resurfacing is one that really has fallen into people don't always want something that is they want dramatic, but they don't have the tolerance for the downtime.
Right.
And I used to say to people, if you can give me 2 weeks, I can give you about 10 years, but you're going to have 2 weeks where you're going to look like you stuck your face in the oven and kissed a blowfish. It's going to be oozy, it's going to be red, and you're going to hold on to that redness for months, particularly if you're light complected.
Yeah.
With the use of the topical and IV deployed stem cells and exosomes now, I can limit that. I can get them back into makeup usually in about a week, and their redness goes away super fast.
Amazing.
And it really is amazing. When I look at the pictures I've taken over the past 30 years, and serial Kodachromes back in the day, but now digital pictures all the way along, and the speed that people heal has changed dramatically now that we have these new technologies. When I do a body lift, and we just did an interview with a patient who had a serial body lift. We did her front and tied together her muscle. We did a true abdominoplasty with umbilical relocation 6 months ago. And the closure is good. I mean, she's a bodybuilder.
Yeah, you do good work.
Thank you. And you know, and it's very acceptable, and it's what I expect. But when we brought an IV deployment of stem cells and exosomes, when we did the posterior,
right,
she's 3 weeks out and she's building new companies. She's back at work already, and the incision line is so tight. It's beautiful. It's just very exciting.
So let's talk about why, right?
Yeah.
Because what we said before would suggest these stem cells did not get deployed into her body and find the wound and attach to it and grow into new tissues to heal up the wound. That's not what
happens.
Right?
Yeah.
These stem cells did not find the suture site and go in and help build new tissues to help sew up the wound. That's not the way these stem cells work.
Yeah.
What the stem cells did was they dropped off cargo that was really critical cargo, right?
Yeah.
These growth factors and cytokines have an important role to play. Had her body already had high concentrations of growth factors and cytokines in them, she would have been healing that rapidly on her own.
Yeah.
Her body is already programmed to heal and recover. I'll bet you when she was 13, if she had had a cut across her back, that wound would have healed incredibly rapid.
Sure.
When we're young, we have high concentrations of bioactive molecules that activate regenerative pathways. As we age, the concentration of those bioactives in our body goes down because our gene expression levels get turned down because our MET pathways got turned down.
Yeah.
So by delivering growth factors and cytokines through a stem cell vehicle into her body, what you did was you gave her what her body needed to heal itself, those growth factors and cytokines that bind her cell receptors and turn on those pathways. So good for you for knowing what your patient's body needed.
Well, the juice was worth the squeeze.
That's right.
So that was kind of fun. You know, and I think about other things that to illustrate the rate that we heal at. You know, when I was first in training and we did circumcisions on a number of newborns, because that was the thing that we did 40 years ago.
Right.
But now I do adult circumcisions sometimes. And even though I'm doing the surgery with a CO2 laser to make my incision, so it's very precise, the tissue is beveled just so, I work in a nearly bloodless field. When you do a circumcision on a baby, 10 days, maybe 2 weeks later, it just looks like nobody was there.
Right.
And you do it on a human adult circumcision, well, it takes a good 6 weeks before they can get back in action. And I think that's the difference between the number, concentration, or density of healing messengers that they have
Yes.
at a young age versus when they're older aged.
The females in your audience will also say that men become bigger babies the older they get.
Absolutely true.
And I don't disagree with that necessarily.
Yeah.
But it is important to note how rapidly, I've got 2 sons, shout out to my boys, they healed incredibly quickly from their circumcisions. And so you've got adults that are being circumcised, it takes them a long time. And you're absolutely right. As young, brand newborns, those regenerative pathways are just pumping. Think about it. My boys were receiving a constant flow of stem cells during the 2nd and 3rd trimesters of gestation. Constant flow into their bloodstream. And so, of course, those pathways were just chugging when they were circumcised. Your adult patients had aged and those pathways had been turned down, and so healing takes longer. Everyone in your audience knows healing takes longer when you're old. It doesn't have to. The reason why it takes so long is because your regenerative pathways aren't operating optimally.
So if we can turn up the volume,
that's right,
and get them to really blast out the message, people can heal better.
So
they can think better.
Yes.
That was the other thing I noticed with this patient. She was busy formulating new companies, reading books. I mean, she was operating at an almost frenetic level from an IV deployment of a Mother Nature's messengers.
Well, you tell me, is inflammation and cellular debris and a lack of blood flow and a lack of cellular growth and division limited to the back?
No.
Where else do you find these things? You find them in the brain.
Yep.
You find brain inflammation and cellular debris, gunk in the neurological region. You find a lack of blood flow there and neurons that don't grow and redevelop. So if growth factors and cytokines are indeed universal in body pathway functions, why wouldn't they also function in the brain? You just need to deliver them across the blood-brain barrier through a vehicle that can go across the blood-brain barrier.
Yep. And there's some great research going on about focusing using ultrasound and things like that to tell them where to go.
Yep.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. How long do cells and exosomes and secretomes, how long, when you do an IV deployment or you do an injection, how long do they stay in the body? What's the MO there?
Oh yeah, good question. So unlike your body's own stem cells that take up permanent residence in your fat tissue and in your bone marrow, exogenous stem cells, or as we say, allogeneic stem cells from another human being, when they're deployed into your body, they don't stay around permanently. They don't become engrafted into your body when you receive an IV infusion or you receive an intra-articular joint injection. They're not programmed for that. There is a whole different industry related to tissue engineering and cell therapy that involves transplanting stem cells in order to get them to take up residence and remain there. But the type of therapy you're doing, the growth factor and cytokine delivery therapy, involves the stem cells staying around for a few days, maybe a week or two.
Yeah. And even if I do a autologous transfer, I don't know how long those stay around, but I know that the effects last longer.
Right. What you would need in order to test that is you would have to have some kind of cell staining, like a fluorescent protein or tagging that you could tag these cells with after you've extracted them and then inject them or administer them and then monitor to see where they go. There have been some studies like that done, and wouldn't you know it, the signal dies down over the course of days and weeks.
Yeah,
so
it
that supports the message that you're presenting, which is these stem cells don't remain in the patient's body. They drop off their cargo, and then the body knows how to get rid of them.
Yeah. So, but that does bring up the discussion of autologous versus allogenic cells. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about those.
I do. So the stem cell industry was plagued by misinformation, fear, and a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
So there was a time when the FDA was slapping everyone with warning letters saying, you're not complying with federal law, you're using stem cells and making claims and doing these things. And the lie went around that stem cells were illegal in the United States.
But they're not.
They're not illegal in the United States. There is a separate regulatory compliance pathway for them, separate from approved FDA drugs.
Yep.
But when they read these warning letters from the FDA, the way they interpreted them was, well, I guess I can't do stem cell therapy now. And so someone said, sure you can. You just have to take the stem cells from the patient's own body, because then the FDA will leave you alone. So
that's the way many of our societies that I belong to came out with those recommendations, warnings, all that stuff, and it set the industry back a decade at least.
Yep, totally agree. So in many ways, the autologous stem cell industry came from the misunderstanding that that's legal and these are not, and people fearing that if I continue to use birth tissue derived stem cells that I'm going to get in trouble with the FDA, but I'll be fine if I do it this way, almost as if it was a fallback plan, a compromise from what they really wanted to use. And I don't disagree with that. My 46-year-old stem cells do not have the same quality of growth factors and cytokines in them as a brand new day one umbilical cord. It's just not the same.
So, but then the patients will ask, well, if you're taking the stem cells from another human, what about graft versus host? What is that compatible with my body?
Yeah, very good question. So placental-derived stem cells that are found in the umbilical cord are amazing in that they're largely immunoprivileged.
Yep.
So what causes cells to elicit an immune response is a human leukocyte antigen that presents on the surface of these cells. And it creates this response. It agitates your body and it gets your body really upset because these are recognized not only as foreign substances, but as antigenic substances. So that's where this graft versus host and rejection come from. The placental-derived stem cells that are found in the umbilical cord, they're largely immunoprivileged. They have very, very low expression of HLAs, some none at all, which causes them in their purified form to be able to be administered without high risks of graft versus host disease. You don't see people getting sick off these. Now, if you're taking umbilical cord blood stem cells and you don't remove all of the red blood cells and other blood components that came from one human, you know as well as I do, you can't mix a blood. Like you go get a blood bag, you have to make sure the blood typing is correct and everything like that. So one of the problems that was encountered early on in the industry is processors weren't removing all of the red blood cells, and so they tried to use cord blood derived stem cells, and people were having negative reactions. It wasn't because the stem cells were dangerous or causing a problem. It's because you were giving type A positive. You were giving type A
positive
transport
blood. Medium.
They're very good.
But that's something that I think people easily confuse, just the way they confuse embryonic versus umbilical derived.
That's right.
The regulations that go with that. So
well, and the bioethical concerns and the connotation that goes along with aborting a fetus and harvesting the embryonic stem cells from it, right? It makes people feel super ick inside. And
besides which it's illegal.
Yes, and so of course the United States has made that illegal. So when you hear about birth tissue derived stem cells, we are not talking about embryo derived or fetal derived stem cells. These are not stem cells coming from the baby. It's coming from the placenta and the umbilical cord, which are just after birth tissue, and many times they're just disposed of.
And they're donated here. They're not paid for.
That's right. So mothers are given an option in many hospitals around the country to donate their umbilical cord to research and therapeutic uses. Mothers under the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act cannot be compensated for those because we don't want people selling organs and selling birth tissues. It incentivizes bad behavior, things like human trafficked tissues and things like that. Can you imagine a birth farm of trafficked human beings where they're just harvesting birth tissue in order to sell them? It'd be a horrible thing.
That would never happen in this world.
Yeah. So one of the things that you want to make sure of is that we're sourcing your stem cells from an operation that has clear transparency, not just a written chain of custody, but a demonstrable, transparent path for mothers who are donating birth tissue out of the goodness of their heart, and that birth tissue is being recovered by a certified and registered birth tissue procurement company and transported into an FDA registered processing lab, and that you as a physician can come and see this entire process take place so that you can look your clients in the eye and say, I've been there, I've seen this, and these are bioethical, safe, and well cared for umbilical cord stem cells.
So one question that came up is, what if the mom wants to donate or save umbilical cord blood for her infant for the future?
Yeah.
So
there have been cord blood banking companies for a long time. Umbilical cord banks you can find all over the place. I think originally these were set out because as science was advancing, people thought, if I have the umbilical cord stem cells from my own baby, if they get cancer later on, we can use these stem cells to help therapeutically heal their cancer. It was mostly hypothetical in nature. We've come a long way since then, and in many ways it could still be a very good idea. It ends up being that you pay a banking fee and a monthly maintenance fee, and many times you never go back and use these. What's more important to recognize is if you need umbilical cord blood stem cells, they don't need to be the ones that your own umbilical cord was producing when you were in the womb.
So say that again, because that's something important for our young mothers to hear, I think, because we have a young mother coming up in our family and I want her to hear this.
That's right. So for the type of stem cell therapies that we're talking about, you don't need your own birth tissue stem cells in order to be used on you. You could use another human being's umbilical cord stem cells in therapy, right? The reason why you might want matching stem cells is if you were performing a tissue engineering or cell therapy function.
True.
You may have heard earlier this year a study that came out of the UK where they took stem cells and they manipulated them. They forced these stem cells to differentiate down the pancreatic islet pathways. And they pushed them so far that they began to produce insulin like pancreatic islet cells do. And then they transplanted these into the pancreas of a type 1 diabetic and put them on immunosuppressants so they didn't reject the new cells that were put in there.
Yeah.
But then these cells produced insulin in a type 1 diabetic.
Yeah.
They got off of insulin, replaced it with immunosuppressants so they didn't reject the cells. But it got people really excited to say, wow, if I had my own stem cells from the umbilical cord that were type matching, and I could push these down the pathway, then perhaps I could cure type 1 diabetes through a cell therapy using my own cells and not need immunosuppressants. It's still really early. It's a great holy grail, but that's where kind of the idea comes from, that you need matching you need your own stem cells if you want to do certain things. And the fact of the matter is 99% of everything that we use stem cells for, you don't need type matching or genetic matching. What you need is proper purification away from the other components that would cause an adverse reaction, like red blood cells from the cord.
Yeah. So, and we do continue to offer adipose-derived cells that can be banked for that potential future use for just that reason. So talk to us a little bit about how to handle these cells, because you've talked about the placenta comes from a mom who's been monitored during a full-term pregnancy, who's not had COVID vaccinations. The spouse has been looked at, the screening for genetic diseases, the screening for
communicable
diseases, all that kind of stuff. The transport, the time between, where the placenta comes from, because if we go out of the country, it's go, well, where do your cells come from? They won't tell you.
Yeah.
But how long it takes to get from point A to the processing, how it's processed, and how are the cells stored to maintain activity or viability, and is that checked again before it's sent out to me, the practitioner? How do I know what I'm giving my patient? How is it handled? I mean, we developed a whole new handling of dry ice and having liquid nitrogen available on site. Sure. And things like that to store our cells. But there are a lot of companies,
yes,
without putting names, that will come to our door and say, oh no, these can go on the shelf, or these can go in the refrigerator, or these can go in the freezer. And when you ask them for activity assays and things like that, they're a little slow in responding. Yeah. And you guys have mastered that, which is the reason that after several years of studying and looking hard under all the rocks, we ended up going with Hyagen.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important that people understand what they're paying for and why it costs what it does.
Let me just say though, you sound like an expert even asking the question. I'm sure that many who are listening are going, what is he even talking about? What are the questions that he's even asking? So let's break this down and go way back to the beginning. Okay, when a soon-to-be mother sees a pamphlet in her OBGYN office that says, have you considered donating your umbilical cord? And they ask a question, is this something I can do? They're put into contact with a registered certified birth tissue recovery company. Okay, this company educates the mother on her ability to donate and what's involved in the process. And after receiving full consent from the mother, they start down a process. That process involves a blood test to make sure that there's no infections or communicable diseases within a couple of weeks before labor and delivery, a couple of weeks after.
Yeah.
It involves a review of medical history. It involves a personal and family medical history questionnaire, right? Mm-hmm. So a full screening process of the health of the mother.
Yeah.
This is important because the healthiest stem cells come from the healthiest birth tissue, which comes from the healthiest mothers. And we want to make sure that we're not just guessing when it comes to where the birth tissue is coming from. Where are the umbilical cords coming from? So we have a very tightly controlled process. This isn't just for regulatory compliance purposes. That's one piece of the puzzle. It's also for quality and best practice to make sure that the end product has the highest quality and efficacy. Okay? Yeah. So on the day of labor and delivery, we know that there are two major routes of delivery. One is a vaginal delivery and one is a cesarean delivery. And not that we advocate for C-section, but a pre-scheduled C-section allows our company three major benefits. Number one, we know that there's a sterile birth tissue collection environment.
Yep.
We don't have to worry about a lot of the other contaminants that are introduced in a vaginal delivery room because
Sure.
we're in a surgical room. Number two, there's not a lot of stress and strain placed on the birth tissue, the umbilical cord, as it passes through the vaginal canal.
Yep.
And we want to treat those stem cells delicately from the very beginning, so we don't want to put a lot of stress and strain on them. Number three is probably the most important, and that is, with a pre-scheduled cesarean, we can prepare the processing lab in advance. So that within a very short amount of time of labor and delivery, once the doctor has finished caring for mother and baby, that birth tissue can be immediately transported over to an FDA registered processing lab for same day processing. Why would you want to process birth tissue on the same day instead of waiting overnight or putting it on ice and shipping it across the country? It's because once these stem cells are outside of their biological environment, every hour counts. These cells begin to die, they begin to decay, they begin to change, And we don't want that. We want the natural biological stem cells, the first generation stem cells, the actual stem cells found in the umbilical cord, to be what we put in the product.
So they've got to be fed, they've got to be oxygenated, they have to have waste removal. All that's going on while the umbilical cord is still intact, connected at one end to mom and one end to the baby. As soon as it's clamped at either end, all bets are off.
Ticking.
The clock is ticking.
That's
You're
right.
on the clock.
That's right.
And so you guys are how far away from the delivery hospital?
We're 1.4 miles away from one of our delivery hospitals.
So you could walk 5 minutes from the DR to the processing plant, literally.
Right.
So
it makes a huge difference. A lot of times if someone comes into your clinic and knocks on the door and says, hey, I'm your local stem cell provider, and if you just ask that one question, very cool, where do you get your umbilical cords from? And they go, I don't know. Or they say, we get them from the highest quality sources of mothers across the country, and they're shipped overnight. Like it's the little things that matter,
Yep.
right? And as they add up in the aggregate, it creates a difference between the final product. So at Hyagen Medical, we have started at the very beginning, and we've identified all of the boxes that could ever be checked in the process. And then we just went through and started checking all the boxes. We've designed a system that from A to Z is optimized for getting the highest quality products for the highest quality therapies.
And not to leave anybody out, because I presume that the dad's history is also checked during this process.
Good question.
We didn't mention them.
So I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but the dad donated one single sperm to this entire process. So dad's medical history is not included in any of this process. It is largely irrelevant.
That's why.
He donated genetic material, not blood, not stem cells, not anything like that. So
gotcha.
Gentlemen, you're important. You have value. Just not
Once.
when it comes to birth tissue and stem cells.
You were there for the creation.
That's right.
Maybe.
And you may have put in more work during the process, but that doesn't mean that we have to review your medical history.
Okay. When you were discussing the process, you were talking about FDA registration and good manufacturing process. What does that mean? Why is that important?
Sure. So it's always great when the FDA will speak on a matter. The hardest part is when the FDA remains silent. But for us, we feel very satisfied that the FDA has given us information. So there are 4 different types of products that the FDA will work with, will regulate.
Okay.
Let's even say 5, because we'll say cosmetic products, right?
Sure.
So you got cosmetic products, those are regulated in a specific way. And as long as they're enhancing beauty and function, the FDA largely says, I'm not so worried about that, as long as they're safe on the market.
The cosmeceuticals that
Correct.
we put on
All of
faces
those
and
types
things
of
like
things.
that. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get rid of those. Second, we have the nutraceuticals. These are the supplement products. And the FDA has struck a deal with supplement companies and said, as long as you say these claims have not been evaluated by the FDA, and this product is not intended to cure, treat, or prevent any disease, and we're promoting or supporting the function of the body, they say, fine. People aren't going to get confused and think you're a drug. You can have your place in the market too.
Spoken like the true attorney you are.
That's right. So get rid of those 2 products. There are 3 left.
Yes.
The first one is the canonical drug product, right? Pharmaceutical drugs. And everyone knows you submit an application for a new drug, you go through clinical trials, the FDA reviews it with scrutiny, and ultimately, if you're successful, you get an FDA approval.
Mm-hmm.
We've already talked about 2 things that the FDA regulates that don't have FDA approvals but are still on the market. So we know that there is such thing as products that are legal but not FDA approved as drugs. One of those things is a biologic product. A biologic product has a separate regulatory pathway, often referred to as a 351 pathway, where a manufacturing facility can receive a license from the FDA to produce these biological products. And as long as they have their license and they stay within their manufacturing guidelines, they can actually make claims about what their biologic product does to help the body.
Okay.
Really cool pathway.
Yep.
Okay, so you've got FDA approved drugs, you've got biologics that are licensed. There is a third pathway called the 361 pathway, and this is specific for human cellular and biological tissue-based products. Human cellular and tissue-based products, HCTPs. Now, HCTPs are uniquely regulated because the FDA has determined that when properly processed, they pose an ultra-low risk of adverse reaction. They're human cellular and tissue products, for goodness sakes. They're going to have a low risk. They're not synthetics, they're not biologic products, they are actual human products. So the FDA put together a whole list of guidelines on how a product could be regulated only under the 361 pathway and therefore not require an approval as a drug product or a biologics license. And those regulations are found in Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations in Section 1271. It's a long document, but when you read through it, what you realize is the FDA's told you everything you need to do in order to use these human tissue, birth tissue derived products as therapeutics. So we started from the original guidelines and we built our company based on compliance. And it's great. We don't have the fear of an FDA regulator coming in and knocking on our door and saying, you're doing something illegal. We know we're not doing something illegal. We're not dealing with FDA approved drugs. We're not dealing with licensed biologics. We're dealing with authorized, compliant 361 HCTPs. And we love the place where we live. This is good.
And you're registered with the FDA.
That's right. So
one of
the
they know you're doing it.
That's right. So one of the requirements in the 1271 guidelines is that the processing facility, the establishment, be registered with the FDA to process the biologics tissue. You can be registered with the FDA for lots of different purposes. You could be registered as a blood bank. Okay, that doesn't give you a registration to process tissues and derive stem cells. It just gives you the storage capacity. So you can be registered to store, to label, to process, to package, to distribute. You can get all kinds of registrations. So you want to make sure that you are working with a group that has an FDA registered facility for processing and packaging and labeling and distributing these products into their state coffers and storing them, right? Because if they don't have those registrations, then they're not complying with the 1271 guidelines. If they're not complying with the 1271 guidelines, they cannot possibly be HCTPs regulated only under Section 361. And if they're not regulated only under Section 361, then they must be a drug or a biologic.
Right.
And that means you have an unapproved drug or an unlicensed biologic, and the FDA will come knocking on your door.
Or you have to be part of a study that
has to be
written. That's a
whole different thing, right?
Yeah.
But to use these therapeutically in your industry, that's what you would need to do. There are other requirements as well. Registration is one of the requirements. I'll give you some examples. The human cellular and tissue-based product can only be minimally manipulated in the U.S.
Same rule I have to live in here.
That's right.
When I isolate them from fat.
That's right. So minimal manipulation means that you're not altering or changing significantly the character of the HCTP.
And homologous use.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So homologous use is another one of the requirements. Homologous use meaning that the basic function or functions of the HCTP is the same in the recipient as in the donor. So we look at these requirements, we look at the guidelines and the feedback that the FDA has given, and we form a regulatory strategy that's compliant, and we build a company based upon this strategy so that we can come to practitioners and say, we've taken care of everything from A to Z.
Thank you.
All you have to do is not screw it up. So as a practitioner, one of the ways that you could screw it up, basically the only way that you would screw it up, is by making claims about what the product is or does as if it was a drug or a licensed biologic. If you say things like, stem cells will heal your wound, stem cells will repair your tissue, stem cells will reduce your inflammation, stem cells will improve your vascularity. Stem cells don't do those things.
Yeah.
This is what we talked about at the beginning. Stem cells don't do that.
It's even tough to hear anymore.
I know. It like makes your ears
I'm
like
cringing.
cringe, right?
Yep.
Stem cells don't reduce inflammation, they don't clear cellular debris, they don't form new vasculature, and they don't activate cellular growth. Those are what the body does. Your body does those things
In response
to growth factor and cytokine signaling.
Yeah.
Stem cells are just the delivery vehicle for more growth factors and cytokines. And when you talk like that, you're not only regulatorily compliant, you're also biologically accurate. And to be honest, it's a lot more satisfying to hear, wait, my body holds the ability to regenerate and heal and repair, and we're just gonna work together to activate my body's ability to heal itself. That's a lot more satisfying than saying, I'm gonna give you a drug and it's gonna help you get better, right? Nobody, maybe it will, maybe it won't.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut into you and it's gonna fix your body. Maybe it does and maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
So telling someone, we know that your body has been evolutionarily and biologically designed to be able to recover and repair and heal itself, and we're gonna tap into some of those pathways. We're gonna get rid of the things in your life that are turning those pathways down, right? Things like inflammatory foods and substances, things like environmental factors. We're gonna limit these things as much as possible so that we're not pushing down on your pathways. And then we're gonna do specialized therapies that we know have been shown to turn pathways back on because of the understanding we have about your body's own molecular mechanisms.
How cool is that?
Well, it's fun to geek out.
Yep. So there was one thing I want to just drop back on before we finish for now, because we have more to talk about.
Great.
But you had also mentioned the GMP aspect of having stem cells and producing them and things. How does that fit into all this?
So after you've been licensed or registered with the FDA and you've shown that you're only minimally manipulating and these are for homologous use, there's a lot more day-to-day operations that needs to happen.
Yeah.
For example, you can't have a processing laboratory that introduces contaminants into the product. Think about all the great lengths that we went to make sure that the umbilical cord blood was pure and safe and well cared for. And if you're in some, storage shed with a biohood and you're processing these things and you're introducing bacteria or something, you've just ruined the entire process. So GMP, which stands for Good Manufacturing Practices, often called CGMP, Current Good Manufacturing Practice, is shorthand for saying you are tracking and tracing and implementing the safety and quality controls that are necessary in order for the FDA to know this is a quality operation that we don't have to fear is going to introduce unnecessary risk.
Yeah.
Of course, every therapy has some risk.
Yeah.
If you're putting a needle into someone, there's some risk involved in that. So we don't want to say we've eliminated all risk associated with stem cell therapy.
No.
But we want to minimize it and mitigate it as much as possible so that we can have the highest confidence we can in the products and in the therapies.
And that means a lot to me as a practitioner in a nationally accredited operating facility.
Right.
Knowing all the hoops that we have to jump through to both get and maintain that national accreditation and be state licensed with. Sometimes they let us know when they're coming and sometimes they don't.
Sure.
So all the T's have to be crossed and all the I's have to be dotted 100% of the time.
Right.
And to know that you're going through that same kind of diligence makes me much more comfortable being able to offer these kinds of products to my patients and stand behind them.
Right, and imagine the confidence you'll have when a state regulator walks in and says, why are you offering stem cell therapies? And you can say, because they're federally compliant and I have all my federal compliance guidelines. So as you know, one of the things that our company specializes in addition to quality products, is legal and regulatory compliance strategies. And we essentially bring you a one-stop shop, a turnkey solution for staying compliant. It's got all of your documentation, your informed consents, your disclosures, everything that you would need in case someone walked in the door and said, hey, I'm auditing you today. You go, great.
Great, glad you're here.
I have a thumb drive with everything that you need right here on it. We've taught you how to keep proper patient records, to track and trace based on lot numbers and expiration dates, their inpatient files. There's no box that we haven't checked. And that lets you sleep at night and work hard in the operating room.
Yeah, it's been a huge weight off of my shoulders to find a company that I could work with that could supply that kind of detail into what we're doing. And the patients are seeing the results. So that's kind of exciting.
Well, good. I think all of it would be for naught if they didn't give outcomes that you were
wouldn't be worth doing.
Excited about. I agree.
The juice has to be worth the squeeze.
Yes. So, yes, indeed.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for hanging with me and going into this amount of detail on our introduction to stem cells and exosomes and things like that. We're going to talk some more about the regulatory and the use of these technologies and things as we get on, just as an educational platform for people, because one of the things that I've discovered over the past more than a decade, but particularly the past 2 years, where I've really been looking for alternative pathways to what I've been doing here in the operating room, is there's a lot of misinformation out there, a huge amount, both on the science side, the practitioner side, and what patients are fed. So we're going to try to dispel some of that, some myth busting, some lack of Kool-Aid drinking, and bring that to you. And we hope you appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in.